In the last video on this Toro trimmer, I explained how I got it for only $5 from an online marketplace, and after giving it a quick cleaning, we manually primed it with some fuel and it started and ran for a few seconds. That means there's a good chance this purchase might lead to a successful repair. So in this video, we're going to see what else we need to fix or replace so we can get it working the way it's supposed to. What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by. Today's project is this Toro string trimmer, and the problem is that I was told that it didn't run. Now since we know it will run for a few seconds when manually primed, we know that the ignition system is working and that the engine is not worn out. That means we need to look at the whole fuel system and see why the previous owner couldn't get it started. Now, I'm going to try and repair this trimmer, however, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, we're only going to mention what these other options could be. We don't have enough time to look into them, but if you need more information on these options, you're welcome to ask as many questions as you need to. The first thing we need to do is put some fresh fuel into the tank, purge the air from the fuel system, and then try starting it. That way we can see the problem firsthand, or in this case, we need to confirm that it won't start. The reason is we don't want to do any unnecessary work, and if I tear it down to inspect it only to find that it's in perfect working condition, I'll have wasted a lot of time and effort when I should have confirmed the problem in the first place. After removing the fuel cap, the first good sign is that there's a fuel filter and it's still connected to the line. That means there isn't going to be any dirt or debris clogging the carb. The fuel I'm using is 89 octane with no ethanol, mixed at 40:1 using a synthetic 2-cycle oil. It's also been stabilized since I got this fuel during the colder months, and although there is still snow on the ground in the shady areas, the temperature during filming is about 60 degrees. Now after pressing the purge bulb about 10 times, we're finally able to see fuel in the bulb, which is great news. If your bulb doesn't get any fuel in it while pressing it, there's a very slim chance that your engine will start and run. And for those of you who might ask, according to the instructions, I will be squeezing the trigger while I pull on the rope. Always check your owner's manual to see if you need to do the same on your trimmer. Well, I'm not sure what to say. According to the previous owner, it didn't run, but as you clearly saw, it started and ran just fine. The only thing I could think of is that they either didn't follow the instructions and flooded the engine with fuel, and that's why it didn't start, or they were using bad fuel. Now that it starts and runs, I don't have to fix it, which makes my job a lot easier. I guess I could get it ready for the mowing season, which means making sure that it lasts through the season without any issues. The first thing that I could address is the fuel tank grommet for the fuel lines. Now these have a tendency to shrink and harden over time, which can cause a serious fuel leak, which is not very safe. If I roll the trimmer on its left side and back to level, you can see there's a disturbing amount of fuel on the outside of the tank. That means before we can use this trimmer, we need to fix this, otherwise there's a very serious risk for a fire. The first thing I want to do is to empty the tank so we can deal with the grommet. Now the fuel cap could also be leaking, but I want to deal with the obvious leak from the grommet first. Then I'll check to see if the gasket on the cap is also leaking, but by the looks of it, it's not that bad, so I don't think we'll have an issue here. I also want to replace the fuel lines as well, only because if the grommet was damaged by the fuel, the lines will be damaged as well. Now, even though the bulb is not cracked or damaged, I also want to replace it as well, and the reason is, when they start to look like this one, it could crack at any moment, so it's just safer to replace it now, but I do have a situation with the replacement for this one, which I'll explain more about later on. Unfortunately, the bulb is a remote style and it's mounted on the air filter base really close to the carb. When this short piece of fuel line hardens, it makes removing the filter base very tough without causing it to come off the port on the carb. Once the base is off the studs, we'll need to disconnect the old fuel lines from the bulb. Just for reference, the shorter port near the top of the bulb goes to the carb, while the longer port at the bottom of the bulb will go to the fuel tank as the return line. Now to remove the bulb, all you need to do is squeeze the tabs on the back of the bulb and it should come loose from the base. The next thing we need to do is disconnect the fuel line from the bottom of the carb, and since the grommet doesn't fit tightly in the opening anymore, we should be able to just pull the entire assembly out of the tank. As you can see, this fuel line has indeed hardened and is no longer flexible, so it's a good thing we're changing these out. Now the fuel filter does have a bit of rust on the end, but after cleaning it off, it should be reusable. Now since the line has hardened, to remove it, we need to split the line. So here's the grommet, and it looks like there's supposed to be two different line sizes, but what happened was that someone tried to stop the leak by replacing one of the lines with a larger diameter one, but unfortunately the grommet was leaking from its outer edges. Now before I reuse the fuel filter, I'm going to try and clean it with some carb cleaner just to make sure it's not clogged with dirt, and after that I'll show you what I want to do with the purge bulb. So here is a replacement bulb, and the problem is that if you buy just one of these, it's as much as $8, and I hate to say it, but that's a lot of money for a small part. But what if you have a bag of spare bulbs that only cost 10 cents each when bought in bulk? Could I save myself almost $7 by just replacing the bulb and not the whole thing? That's what I'm going to try and do. To start, I'm going to try and release the retaining ring on the bulb. Once it's loose, we can then remove the ring and then take off the old bulb. Now just be very careful and try not to stab yourself in the hand or the finger because it's happened before and it doesn't feel good. I'll then test fit the new bulb just to make sure it's going to work, which it does. After that, I need to find a way to hold the bulb together while the epoxy I'm going to use to seal it sets up. To do that, I'm going to use a socket to hold the lower portion of the bulb as well as a different socket to hold the bulb section. Next, I'll mix a small amount of epoxy thoroughly and then apply it to the mating surface for the ring and the plastic base. I know it looks like I'm applying a little bit too much, but as long as I don't get any inside of it, I should be okay. Once I join the two pieces together, I'll then use a clamp to hold it together while I wait the 10 minutes for it to cure. While I'm waiting, I'm going to measure the opening to find out what size grommet I need. It looks like the opening is about 7/8 of an inch, so that's the size I'm going to order. So it's been over 10 minutes, and if I check what's left of the epoxy, I can see it's hardened very well, so I should be able to take the clamp off the bulb and then test it if it'll come apart when I press on it. If it comes apart, then I'll have to use a different epoxy, but as you can see, it looks like it's holding very well, so I'm going to consider this a very successful modification, and I saved myself a decent amount of money. For the next part, I'm going to remove the fuel tank so it's easier to film, but it's not necessary. This is when I noticed there's a fair amount of dirt and grease that I didn't get when I last cleaned it because I didn't take the tank off. I'll just take a few minutes to spray it down with a degreaser, scrub on it for a little bit, and then rinse it with some water. I'll also do the same thing for the top of the fuel tank. Just make sure you don't get any of the water inside the tank. So here are the grommets I purchased from an online retailer. I bought a multi-pack, that way each grommet was only 90 cents. If you only need to buy one of these, you'll need to pay about $5 for it, which I think is an absolute ripoff, but unfortunately, they're priced that way so you have to buy more than one. If you need some of these, there is a link in the description below this video. Once the grommet is securely in place, I'm going to start running the new fuel lines. This yellow Tygon line is supposed to be more ethanol resistant than the clear line. The line size I'm using is 3/16 of an inch, and I'll be using it for both lines. The first line I'll be making will be the fuel filter line, but it doesn't matter if you do this first or the return line. It also doesn't matter which hole you make the fuel filter line or the return line. After cutting off the angle piece, make sure you have plenty of fuel line in the tank, and once the filter is installed on the line, I'll put it back into the tank and check to make sure that the filter can reach the far side of the tank. I'll then use the same method to make the return line. When installing the return line in the tank, I usually put about a minimum of at least 1 inch of line into the tank to make sure it won't come out of the grommet. Once the lines have been installed, I'll put the tank back on the trimmer and then move on to the purge bulb. Now the bulb only installs on the filter base one way, so be careful when installing it. If it doesn't click into place, check to make sure that the upper tab is positioned towards the top of the opening. Now this short piece of fuel line will go on the shorter port on the purge bulb and will connect to the horizontal port on the carb. You don't have to install it now, but it's much easier doing it now than later. Once it's been connected, I'll then connect the return line from the fuel tank to the longer port on the purge bulb. Once it's connected, the last line to connect is the one from the fuel filter. I left that line long, that way I can cut it to length so it doesn't end up being too short. First, I'll install the carb, then the filter base, then trim the line to length, and finally install it to the port on the carb that's pointing downward. The next step is to put the same fuel back into the tank, prime the fuel system, and then try starting it. So when pressing the purge bulb, fuel should come up the filter line out of the tank, go through the carb, and then enter the bulb, and then go back to the tank by the return line. And as you can see, the fuel is flowing through the lines just like it's supposed to. If yours doesn't flow like this, then I would check to make sure the lines are connected to the right ports, and if they are connected correctly, I would then consider a new purge bulb. The last thing we need to do is to reconnect the throttle cable to the carb, anchor the cable, and then replace the air filter and its cover. In the last video on this trimmer, we found out that the air filter was already breaking down and we had to remove it in pieces. Now this filter was bought as an 8-pack, and so each one was only $1.40. If all possible, make sure you run your trimmer with an air filter, otherwise you could damage your engine. So we already knew that it ran fine, but since we redid the fuel lines, we had to make sure it still works. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think Toro is going to continue to make these gas trimmers and are moving towards battery power. The reason I say that is I've been looking for them at my local big box store and cannot get one in my town or in several towns I've searched across the US. That means if you want one of these gasoline trimmers from Toro, you won't be able to buy a new one from the stores anywhere. Now I have found them online from no-name vendors that I wouldn't trust my personal information with because they might sell them off, but if I can still find them on the used market locally, I wouldn't mind getting them that way. So another option as to why the previous owner couldn't get this started was that maybe they read the instructions but didn't understand how to work the choke. And what I'm talking about is which position is no choke and full choke. It'd be easy to do on this one because the sticker that shows where full choke is has since disappeared. To confirm which position is full choke, remove the air filter and move the lever and find where the inlet for the carb is covered, and that will be the position for full choke. So my question is, does knowing that your favorite trimmer brand, whichever it may be, is getting ready to stop making the gasoline version, would it cause you to go out and buy another one just to have on hand because you're not ready to switch over yet? I had to really think about this one, and personally, I don't think I would buy an extra one, and the reason is because I'm going to make sure that the one I have is going to last as long as humanly possible. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.